Hi guys, what is up? It is Alex here, and today I'm going to be making a video on a race preview for the Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi coming up in about a week's time. And you can see here, it's a bit of footage from me go-karting, and I thought I'd bring something a little bit different to these videos, because I know most of the time I post just commentaries over games, and today I want to do something a little bit different. So today I'm going to just show you a bit of karting footage that I literally got a couple of hours ago, and I think I messed up the camera angle once again. I think it's too high now, and I just wanted it to be a little bit lower so you could see me steering in the shot as well. But you know, there's some footage in the background for you to watch whilst I'm talking about the Grand Prix coming up next weekend. And the reason this video is a day early as well is because I've got a host of stories to talk about next week, or a load of stories to talk about, and I think that I want to have them in the 5 days and not a race preview at the start. So guys, that is pretty much it for this video. We're going to get into it now and talk about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that's coming up in about a week's time, and have a little bit of my predictions. It's coming off a weekend where Red Bull looked pretty strong once again, and in the race pace we saw, McLaren and Ferrari pretty similar to the Red Bull, but the first couple of laps were dominated by Mark Webber and Vettel storming out at the front. So it does kind of look like it's going to be another race that sort of Red Bull suit. And Abu Dhabi could be a track where the Ferraris and the McLarens are a little bit closer, because if we look back in recent races, Hamilton's been very fast here, so maybe he can mix things up a little bit. And we also see in here some ties to deciding moves. For example, Petrov holding up Alonso, I think it was 2010. There's been a lot of things around this Abu Dhabi circuit that have tied up the championship for some people, even in its short lifetime on the calendar. So we're going to be talking about the teams in a minute. But first I want to give my last impressions of the Indian Grand Prix and just talk about it quickly and give my final opinions on it. Sebastian Vettel drove a great race to win the race, obviously, and I think he fully deserved it. He didn't put a foot wrong all weekend and grabbed the pole, led every lap, fastest. Actually no, he didn't get the fastest lap. That went to Button, and I did make that mistake in the video, yes, I'm sorry. And he had a pretty much perfect weekend, but I think the driver of the day must really have been Fernando Alonso. We've seen that Massa's on form, and I think he finished about 6th position, and Alonso just excelled the car today, got a 2nd place and absolutely stormed the race, and he fully deserved that 2nd place, and hopefully he can still challenge Vettel for the championship, even though it's going to be a hard one now. And we did talk about that in the Formula 1 show podcast a little bit, but it's going to be extremely hard for Alonso to claw back this deficit now in a car that is not as fast. So first off, we'll talk about Red Bull coming off one of the most dominant weekends in the race season so far. They did a pretty good job, even though they didn't get the 1-2, they still had a pretty decent result with both cars on the podium, and Red Bull once again looked like the fastest car in the field after having a tricky first half of the season. And I would say that Red Bull probably are most likely going to be taking this race once again. It looks unlikely that any other team will be competing with them for the sort of top honours in the race, and unless somebody like Vettel or Webber has the problem where they move their tyres go off, they get punched or something like that, I'm pretty sure they're going to be both on the podium yet again. And it's sort of that circuit where it's going to be a bit closer, but I still think the Red Bulls have got the pace in them to win. And that's bad for teams like McLaren and Ferrari, which obviously have a stellar car as well, but just not quite the pace of the Red Bull. So next off we'll move on to McLaren and talk about them briefly, because they come off a weekend where they probably could have done a lot better, because if we look at their lap times throughout the race, they've done a lot better than the Red Bulls in that department. Their one-off pace looked actually quite a lot better nearer the end of the weekend, and maybe just if they pulled it together at the start of the weekend, they could have been a lot closer to the Red Bulls, because Webber's and Vettel's lap times weren't really comparable to Button's and Hamilton's nearing the end of the race. Hamilton and Button were putting in some great lap times near the end. It's just sad that they didn't have the great start. So in Abu Dhabi, I think that the McLarens will be the closest car to the Red Bull, and in recent years Hamilton's been pretty good here, so I'm actually going to think that Hamilton could win this race, and I'm going to put my money down. I'm not going to put any money down, but I'm going to put my bet down and say that Hamilton will win this race and break this sort of four race streak of Vettel winning everyone, and I think Button's going to be right up there too, so it's going to spoil the championship a little bit, as neither of them really are going for it anymore, and it's going to really make it a little bit more interesting, and hopefully they can cause a little bit of chaos. So Ferrari come off a lucky weekend of making the podium in a car which really shouldn't have been up there. We saw Felipe Massa finish 6th, I think it was, in the car, which really wasn't that good. Only about equal pace to the Lotus, probably even a bit slower than the Lotus. And it's remarkable that Alonso pulled it out of the bag in the time that he actually needs to match Vettel, he actually does it and he pulls it out the bag, and it's good to see that he did it. And I kind of want just a good championship. If it goes down to the wire, that's what I want to see. So hopefully Ferrari can make upgrades in this 1 week they have got, but I doubt they're going to make some significant upgrades. I think that's going to be coming in Austin, Texas, I think it is, and I also think they might be bringing some mega upgrades to Brazil if they've got the resources, but don't always count out Ferrari. Alonso will always pull one out the bag when he needs to, and expect Alonso to be up there, and expect Massa to be on form again after some pretty decent races in recent times. So next off we'll move on to Mercedes, and they come off a weekend struggling for performance and speed. They could have got a top 10 with Nico Rosberg, but Bruno Senna snapped it at the last second to get that off him. And Mercedes, they've fallen right back down the field. It's kind of sad to see after their wonderful win in China and their podiums throughout the season in Monaco and Valencia are the ones I remember. And it's just sad to see the car drop back so much, and in Abu Dhabi I fear once again it's going to be a track that don't suit them, or won't suit them even, and it's just going a spiralling circle for Mercedes. They're going to have to start working on next year's car if they haven't already, because this year they really haven't got anything to play for anymore, and there's probably not much point reviewing this car or upgrading it, because it's really not on the pace, and I don't think they can make it on the pace very easily. So Mercedes probably going to struggle this weekend, and it's a bit sad because they dropped back so much, but they didn't do the upgrades earlier on the season, so they're sort of paying for it now, aren't they? So Lotus come into this weekend with a pretty average weekend if we think about it really. They scored some decent points with Kimi Raikkonen actually getting to the points, and also I think Romain Grosjean got into the points as well. Raikkonen finished 7th, Grosjean finishing 9th, so they both got points in the end, but it's also slipping back because they could still get 3rd in the Drivers' Championship, and if they don't update the car, it's going to be quite hard for Kimi Raikkonen to keep that, and they're going to have to keep upgrading, and hopefully they can still grab that 3rd, because Raikkonen's drove an amazing season. I really think he deserves to keep that 3rd in drivers, but it's going to be hard obviously, because Lotus, we've seen in recent years, they have sort of struggled, or even Renault have struggled in the last couple of races, and they seem to have died down at the end. So who knows what Lotus is going to be bringing to these next couple of races, whether they're going to bring any updates whatsoever, or they can look towards 2013's car. But Abu Dhabi seems to be a circuit which they could do quite well at if they get it right. And I think they're sort of like a Red Bull at like 95%. They just don't have that last 5% to match the Red Bulls. But they're probably going to be fast here in Abu Dhabi. I wouldn't expect to get a win or a podium, but who can tell? Raikkonen can always bring one out of the bag. As I said with Alonso, they can always bring it out of the bag and get a great result when he needs to. So next off we'll move on to Sauber and have a quick talk about them. In recent races they've sort of fallen off the pace a little bit. We could have thought Perez might have scored a couple of points in India, but I think his problem with his puncture obviously sealed his fate there, which meant he didn't get any points. Kobayashi's sort of been struggling since his podium in it. I think it was Japan, wasn't it? It was at his home race. And it's kind of sad to see, because Kobayashi really should be driving for his career at the moment, because he might not get another one or another podium ever in his career. This could be his last season in Formula 1 if nobody else picks him up. But I think Kobayashi's one of those guys that sort of deserves an F1 seat, but there's just too many talented guys out there which deserve a seat, and I think he's like just outside it. I mean, he's got some great moves inside him, he's got some great pace inside of him, but he's just not consistent enough for Sauber, and that's what they need, because they need those points to keep ahead of Force India and Williams in the constructors, and at the moment neither of their drivers are being very consistent, and that's going to be hurting their team and their chances of getting good points for sure. Arguably, Force India's Nico Hülkenberg was the driver of the day at India. Lots of people have put that down in the comment section of my last video, and that's sort of a thing making me think, like, is Hülkenberg really deserving of this Force India seat, or does he deserve something even better? In my opinion, Di Resta was always a little bit slower than Hülkenberg, and I believe that Hülkenberg could do really well in his career, and it was sad to see him booted out of Williams in 2010, or the end of 2010. He's got so much pace inside him, he's a very fast driver, and I think he deserves a better team. He's probably not going to be moving up to a top tier team next year. It looks like either Sauber or Force India will be the teams that he'll be at, and I think he's got a high possibility of maybe replacing Massa at the end of next season, but who knows, it's going to be changing from day to day of what the drivers are going to be going to next year, so who knows, but the rest does seem to have some alright race pace in India, nothing special, nothing sublime. Nico Hülkenberg pulled out a couple of points, which was good to see as well, putting him a bit higher up in the championship. But for me, Force India probably won't be doing too well in Abu Dhabi. They could probably get a couple of points, yes, but I don't think they will be going for their higher points which they could have achieved earlier in the season. It just seems to be another racetrack where they probably just can't excel at. It seems to be one of those tracks where I think that it probably more suits the people like the Red Bull, the more like the Lotus, and maybe someone like the McLaren, which have a bit more initial downforce. And expect to see Force India struggling to get into the top 10 in quali, but probably scoring some decent points in the race. So Force India is always going to be one to look out for, as they always bring some points at the end of the day. They always get points somehow, and I expect them to get some more points as well. But you know, who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be a crazy race for sure. So let's move on to Williams, and they actually seem to have a turn of speed in India after having a pretty dismal Korean Grand Prix and also a pretty dismal Japanese Grand Prix. They seem to have brought it back a little bit more. Pastor Maldonado doing quite well in qualifying, getting to Q3, and it looked like Senna was always the faster guy this weekend, and he brought home the points after Maldonado and Kobayashi having an accident, which I still think is a racing accident, but maybe they should have both been a bit more cautious, and maybe they should have just both backed off a little bit and made sure they both got to the end. But Williams hopefully going to score some points this weekend. Williams is probably my favourite team on the whole grid, if I'm totally honest. Even though neither of the drivers are particularly my favourite, I still just love supporting Williams, as they are sort of the home British team, except for McLaren. They're both pretty big in the British culture around here. And you know, I wish just McLaren and Williams scored some points this weekend. I think Williams are probably less likely to get points than McLaren, obviously, but Williams can probably score points. They've got some turn of pace in the last race, so hopefully they can transfer that into this Grand Prix, and I think it's going to be a track which probably suits them a little bit more, and hopefully they can pull it home, and hopefully they can get some points, because as I said, Williams is my favourite team on the grid. Next up in the constructor standings is Toro Rosso, and Daniel Ricciardo and Jean-Eric Vergne both getting into a little bit of trouble at Korea, but I think in Abu Dhabi they're going to have a little bit more luck, because I think this is going to be a track which might suit the Toro Rosso a little bit more. Don't take my word for it, I think it could be, but who knows. I'm going to put my little bit of a tip down that Toro Rosso might be a little bit faster this weekend. I think they could be up there a little bit more. I think they actually might be ahead of Mercedes this weekend. That's how slow the Mercedes is recently. And you know, I think Toro Rosso probably have a good chance of getting near the top 10, but I don't think they're going to be scoring points, just because at the moment the points are so hard to get into. You're going to have some pure talent to get up there, and you know, all the cars aren't breaking down, everybody's finishing, so it's really hard. You need to have a bit of luck or something to get in the top 10, especially one of your back teams like Williams or Toro Rosso when the car really isn't fast enough. You need a little bit of luck, or you need pure skill. And the recent races, both their drivers have been going quite well, so hopefully I can see Toro Rosso up there. It'd be nice to see them score some points towards the end of the season, because normally they back off right towards the end of the season, and normally the drivers get kicked out, so it'd be good to see them score some points and get back up there. But I just want to see a good championship, and hopefully maybe some of these guys at the back of the grid can mix it up a little bit for us. That's what we want to see. Having a good sort of end to the year after such a wonderful year. We want to see an exciting end, not just Vettel dominating. So let's move on to the last three teams on the grid. First off, we'll talk about Marussia, as they are higher up in the constructor standings. They seem to have fallen back from Caterham once again after getting their one good result. I think it was in maybe Japan, I think it was, where they got a pretty decent result and got ahead of Caterham in the standings. Marussia seem to have fallen back a little bit. It doesn't look like a track which will particularly suit them, but then it's hard to tell. They're all up and down at the back of the grid. Who knows who's going to be fast at the back? But it looks like a track where it's probably going to be more suited to Caterham's. Their drivers, Kovalainen and Petrov, are pretty good around here, and I wouldn't put them off getting nearer to the Toro Rossos in this race. And let's lastly talk about HRT after having some problems in the Indian Grand Prix. Even though Karthikeyan actually managed to get to the end, they're having brake problems throughout this weekend, or the weekend, and it sort of ruined their chances of getting anywhere near to the Marussias and the Caterhams. But for the back three teams, it's just about getting a highest position as they possibly can, so they can get 10th in the constructor standings and get a little bit of money for next year's car, which is going to be hopefully a little bit better than this year's cars. But guys, that's pretty much it. We've gone through the whole grid for this race weekend, so I want to quickly talk about the championship and how it stands at the moment. I think Sebastian Vettel leads the championship by 13 points from Fernando Alonso going into this race, and it's certainly going to be a tough one to see if Alonso can catch up and sort of grab some points back from Sebastian Vettel. I mean, if Alonso can beat Vettel in these next couple of races, if Alonso can win and Vettel comes second in two of these races, that deficit will completely go and they will be back on level terms again. But it's going to be a tough one. Hopefully it will go down to the wire in the Brazilian Grand Prix in about 3 or 4 weeks time, and hopefully we're going to have an entertaining one, because this is going to be certainly going to be an entertaining season, and hopefully it's going to end the way it started, in much drama and loads and loads of crashes. So guys, that's pretty much it. Hopefully we're going to see some clean racing in this next race at Abu Dhabi. Hopefully nobody's going to get taken out. Hopefully it's going to be a clean race, and hopefully we can see Alonso clutching some points back on Sebastian Vettel, and hopefully we can see a good championship, which is what we all want to see. But guys, that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and hopefully you'll enjoy the videos coming up in the next week or so. And remember to go and check out the podcast. I'll link that down in the description as well. It's a good race review with MX Chris 50 quid for the win, and myself and the Grid Walker, so you can go and check out that down in the description of this video. But thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day. It's been Alex, and I'm out here. Bye.